There's been a few iterations of the Doom Imp over the years, but today I wanted to try something fun and try to translate his original sprite into a sort of real creature. So we're looking at this guy, not this guy from the new one, but the classic, and we're gonna try to imagine what he would look like in universe. So, the Imp. Imp. There we go. So the Imp. What do we do with this guy? So if we're gonna realize this sprite and kind of see try to translate it into something full, what does it look like? Well, let's start with the themes. So basic building blocks. This guy is sort of a muscly dude. What do we got? Elements. We've got spikes. We have got this weird face. He has a really distinctive, big open mouth here. We might be able to incorporate that somewhere. So let's make sure we keep that in mind. Bald. What else? That's kind of the basics. So that's enough to get going on here. We also know his name, which is the Imp, and his purpose, which is to be just kind of like general infantry for the Doom people, for the demons, for the invasion. I don't know. We don't have a name for the official grouping of demons in Doom, so I'm just gonna call them Doom. There we go. So these guys are like footline soldiers for the Doom. They're everywhere. Other than the possessed soldiers, they're like the most common enemy you fight. There's a few things about them that are kind of unique though, and I'll kind of talk about them as we go. So let's start with all this as like our basic building blocks, and let's think about what we want to do with this guy to realize his sprite as a full kind of living creature. Now, just as a thing, we're using just the old one. I'm not going to be looking at Doom 3 or Doom 2016 or Doom Eternal. We're just looking at the basic bones and kind of figuring out what this guy would look like if he was a real creature. So, to start with, things in Doom that we have to keep in mind that are important. Some of the important themes. Doom is all about a couple of specific things. Machines mixed with flesh. That is the biggest theme. That is the biggest visual theme. Almost everywhere in Doom, you'll see these creatures that's just like muscle with wires coming in and out of it and devices and things, which is obviously part of the visual appeal. But if we're translating this into something and kind of something into real time, we have to think about how those design elements fit into the actual creatures. Why are they all machines and metal? Well, there's no official reason. I've always figured that they needed those machine parts to stay stable, because they're demons and it's like a demonic incursion. They're coming from a portal or something. That maybe they use those mechanical parts to ground themselves in reality, a la sort of Warhammer style, because they're demons, so they're naturally kind of mystical. They sort of exist in hell or whatever, wherever they're from. So they use these mechanical parts to ground themselves in reality, which to me is why you see bigger and badder demons in Doom. They have more and more mechanical parts, all the way up to you get to the Spider Mastermind, which is just a brain in a big mechanical spider suit with machine guns. So I like to think all the demons have a little bit of bionics in them somewhere, which would include the Imp. Now, it's possible that even going down that theory, that the Imp just doesn't need any of that, and that's why it works. But I have kind of a different theory on why the Imp the way he is, and we'll talk about it as we go. First thing we need to do, we need to find a pose for this guy. We know from the game that these guys kind of stand up straight. They've got their head a little bit forward. Let's put this on top. They've got their head a little bit forward, and they're kind of jacked. So we'll give him that kind of forward neck. We'll include that in the design. But all in all, they stand up fairly straight, and they're built like frickin' pro wrestlers. So they've got this big sort of imposing, stomping presence. I always, when you say Imp, it really does make you think about a crouching creature, something that would maybe something that would fly. The only things these guys have in common with the Imps you would expect is that they shoot fire, which is another interesting trait of them. We're gonna put him standing up, just kind of a nice imposing, sort of that kind of thing. We'll center his face this way, that way we can get a good view. We don't want to do a character design in profile. That would be crazy. You wouldn't be able to see half his face. So this, kind of his arms. We know he's got claws. He's going to have some spikes going on the distinctive parts of his body, periodic and specific spikes. One thing that's interesting about this guy, especially with the spikes, now we're interpreting sprites. Naturally, there's things that exist because it's a video game, so it doesn't. Not everything should be interpreted into something, but I'm gonna do it anyway. So these guys' spikes are all in the same place on every one of them, and it sort of implies that they're identical, that all the imps like look exactly the same. Now, that could be something to gloss over, but here's what really enforces that to me, and it's kind of funny, but stay with me, is his teeth. Look at his perfect teeth. Look at his perfect teeth. Straight. He's got like a little bit of lift right here, but for the most part, they're really good. Now, that's because he's a cartoon character and it's easier to animate straight teeth. But like, if you knew that these guys were like different, if there was some variation, even when you were doing the pixel art, like, why not give him just a little bit of like variation? You know what I mean? Even if you were working in like dead pixels and you needed to make just like white, like teeth. If he was a monster, you might put a little bit of sway in it. You might put just a little bit of like, and even though they would all look the same, it would give that natural implication that they have kind of messed up teeth or whatever, like you'd expect a demon to have. But he doesn't. His teeth are perfect, horns all in the same place every time. Big muscly creature, because he's a demon, but why not? Like, so he's big and he's muscly, he's got perfect teeth, perfect horns, they all have a symmetrical ability to shoot fire, and they are immune to each other's fireballs, is a nice little detail from the game. So, that leads me to believe that they're designed in a certain way, you know what I mean? So I've always liked to think that these guys were like, maybe manufactured. That's why they are the way they are, that's why they have perfect teeth, that's why they have these spikes, that's why they're completely just like devoid of fear, they just kind of fight you. A lot of places they are in the game, especially in the early game, they are in like places where they can alarm people, like the demonic soldiers. Like, even right in the first like level, the first one of these dudes you see is up on a cliffside, and he kind of is like, "Arr!" and he sort of tells everybody where you're at. So they're maybe they're a little bit more important than like the zombie soldiers, because they're like sort of the frontline troops, but they cost something. You know what I mean? It sort of seems like that. So I think they have that sameness for a reason. Now, how that translates into a design is really up to you. Maybe that's something, maybe that's nothing. But because of the themes we're working with here, remember we've got this idea of like machines and flesh, I think that's how they're given the ability to shoot fire. I don't think they can do it because they're demons. I think they have some sort of implant that lets them do it. They all shoot it out of the same hand too. So that's something else. They always shoot it out of their right hand, which means their right hand can shoot fire. Otherwise, they would shoot it out of both hands, wouldn't they? I know, because it's a video game, but we're interpreting. Go with me here. So, this hand, I'm going to say, has some kind of, or some part of their body is wired into it. Now, of course, we're adding a little bit to this sprite because it's very simple, but I'm thinking maybe something like in the shoulder, maybe something small, or maybe it's something we'll kind of work into just like the design of his body. I don't know if I want to do like a full wire. That's a little bit too much to add, but I definitely want to do something with it. And I think we'll add little moments where we can see the machinery on this guy, little like pleats and plates or something. Not too much, because these guys aren't important. They're definitely like foot soldiers. They're mass produced. They would have the bare minimum. These guys are the cheap sheets of demons. So we want to give them just little details. So let's actually start with this arm, since that's like a good focal point and it's on my mind already. So let's design this first. We know it's muscly just like the other arm. I guess muscles are cheap in hell, you know. If you're gonna make a demon, why not slap it on there? It comes with a standard package. Everything else costs extra. Something that's kind of neat about that too, the thing that led me to this idea that they had something that lets them shoot fire, is like none of the other demons can have like magic, like unassisted, or almost none of them. Only really badass ones. In the first game, in like the first chunk of Doom, the only monster that really can do it is the Baron of Hell, who's naturally way more badass than this guy. But also, you fight the Baron of Hell like next to a portal to hell. So I don't know, maybe he's got like good access to demon magic. It's hard to say. But so anyway, he's a real deal demon. He's a big boy. Of course, he might not need like something special, or maybe he's got an implant too. Who knows? But he doesn't need it. And then like the Archvile, of course, and Hell Knights. I don't remember what the other guys are called. The wimpy demon Barons of Hell. But so there aren't a whole lot of guys that can shoot stuff unaided, that don't have technology or magic or like rocket launchers or something. Some of them are carrying stuff, some of them have things fused on. But that would also explain why they go through the trouble of zombifying like humans. If you could mass produce demons, if you have a million imps, why bother? Well, I mean, maybe it's psychological. There's all kinds of like, you could theory craft all day, and it's extremely valid to do. It'd be really fun. But I like to think it's to make up for the expense of having ranged weapons. If you were demons, if you're a gang of demons, and only the biggest dude in your group can shoot fire out of his hands, then a regular dude with a gun is actually kind of dangerous. Because even if you're, almost invulnerable, at a certain point a gun's a gun and could do some damage to you. And we know that because of Doom, these demons are absolutely not bulletproof. They're resistant, but not proof. So it makes sense to have a bunch of guys around that can shoot guns for you, just zombify them. Why demons themselves can't learn to just pick up a gun is anybody's guess, but who knows. Alright, so there's our basic shape, but now we want to add some stuff to it. So maybe it's something that's like worked into his flesh a little bit. It's not obvious because it's minor, so it's probably just like grafted in. Because this guy wasn't, like the other demons all look like they were made and then modified, or they they stood in a line and got their modifications added by some kind of cool demon surgeon. Maybe that's what the Spider Mastermind does. Maybe that's his jam. He actually does operations so that all the demons can be cool. But so let's work that into. These guys were manufactured, so it can just be a part of their body. It doesn't have to be anything. It doesn't have to be anything that was like added on. But we want to find a nice way to incorporate that where it's kind of obvious, but it doesn't take us too far away from our basic sprite we're working on. So I'm thinking just some little, and then maybe just some like little spots in the flesh. Or actually, you know what? It'd be cool if they had these as kind of like maybe put these in here and use them as like kind of a vent. So he'd have these like pipes. It would be like a pipe that runs like inside, maybe like around near his bones or something, or I don't know. He probably doesn't have like veins, because what does he need blood for? He's a demon, or whatever's in there. So this is like in his internal wiring would be like these pipes, but since he has to shoot fire, there would be like a thing in his hand that actually expels it, but it would still like heat up. It would probably have like a coil or something, so maybe he has these vents, so when he shoots fire, they like, sort of kind of like that side blast, like how sometimes a gun barrel has like those holes in the side to, I don't know, reduce recoil. I don't know anything about guns, but it's a cool visual thing, and I think that would be a cool way to work that in. So let's say that's what these are. They're like little thermal vents that he can use, and we'll put one there, and maybe one like. Actually, no. Let's move it up. Let's put them on like his wrist. That way it'd be a nice visual symmetry when he was shooting it. And then this one, we'll leave that one in the front, and we'll put two on the side here. So if he shot it, you would have this nice. Do bursts of heat coming out the top of his hand when he lifted it up and did it. I'll have to draw him with his hand up so we can get a visual of him like shooting. But yeah, so let's work that in, and then maybe just kind of model the flesh around it, because naturally this would be like protruding out from where his skin is. Maybe we'll open this hand up too. Maybe get him kind of. There we go. So we can kind of see his little. Whatever he shoots fire out of. Now in the sprite, naturally we see him lift up his hand, and we know from playing Doom that it's just a hand. There's nothing in there. But I'd like to do something a little bit different than that. Let's see. Let's put his hand downward just so we can have a nice natural pose. Yeah, nice natural pose here. Boom, boom, boom. He's got his big cool claws. You might remember from Doom, or you might not, because it's pretty easy to forget. These guys actually claw you if you get close to them. I played Doom a million times. I played it when I was a kid like crazy. It's one of my favorite games. And I was reading that not terribly long ago. It said like, oh, the imps, they do this much damage with their fire and this much damage with their claws. And I was like, claws? Is that from Brutal Doom? They don't attack you with their claws. I don't remember that. And they absolutely do if you get up in their face. They just use a very similar animation, so you'd be forgiving for not noticing it. or at least I hope I will. But it's tremendously similar, but they do actually claw you, and it's a different attack for a different amount of damage, which is neat, because there's very few enemies in Doom that have like a variety of moves. These guys kind of respond to where you are. Alright, and then let's maybe put like a mark. So that's not going to be a pipe on the outside. We'll erase most of it, but it'll be kind of like this raised, this little bit of like raised skin. So we see that there's like a pipe underneath, like a little bit of like, there's like a piece of metal under there. Actually, that's a nice visual thing. Let's work that up too. Oh, it's a little gross. It makes me think of like varicose veins, which kind of grosses me out, but it's a cool. He's a demon. He can be a little bit gross. So it'll work up here, and then it'll be like, kind of like that vein on your arm. It'll be a little bit similar, and then work its way up to this pipe. Yeah, that's the way. And we'll do that mostly. We'll add a little bit of light in later to make that really shine. But for right now, I'm gonna leave it just so we remember that it's there. It's kind of gross. And then we'll need one right around the wrist. Yeah, that's nasty. I love it. Okay. So there's that. There's that. A little gross. That's his hand. That's his hand, and we'll make sure to put a tinge of metal on that when we're coloring it. That way we can kind of see this standing out above the skin it's connected to. And then this hand, we'll just do on a separate drawing. So here's his hand. Chicken wings. There we go. Okay, so here's his hand. So let's look like the palm of his hand. I would like to make a little dip. So they have 3 fingers, I think like this. Let's reference material. Okay, that doesn't help. He's just got a fist. We can look it up, but let's not. I believe he has 3 fingers. We're just gonna go with it. If he has more than that, fucking work with it. If he has more than that, just work with it. All right. So the inside of his palm. What did it come around the front side? So you'd have this like flesh pipe coming up, and then maybe like it's like the same shape, but it's like a vent, or like not a vent. What's the word? Like like a contact point that he can shoot fire out of. You could go basic and just make it like a pipe right here and just, which actually is a little more. No, we'll do that because the Doom is very industrial. It's sci-fi, but it's this really junky, dirty, like a step past Star Wars. Everything's like busted and broken up, kind of sci-fi. So let's a very industrial science fiction. So let's bring that pipe in, and let's just say on his palm he's got like a nice little hand hole here. And you know what? When he shoots fireballs at you, you can't see it because there's a fireball in the way. That's a good enough reason. And that is a terrible hand, but it communicates the idea, and that's what we're here for. So there's this cool little demon hand. Shoots fire and shit everywhere. Okay. So now we got that part of his body, but let's move on. Other distinctive things about this guy. Let's look. We got that arm done. Let's look back, see what we want to do next. Now, I know we want to do something with the face here. That should definitely get some attention. And we'll do his legs a little bit. We don't have to put too much emphasis on his legs because his sprite doesn't really emphasize them. He walks around. They're mainly there to make him look imposing, but he's very upper body, which is exactly the way you would like manufacture a scary demon if you were, you know what I mean? He's like prison strong. It's all upper body, and then he's just kind of got legs. He's got some thighs though. Look at him. Bam. He doesn't skip leg day. All right. Back down here then. So let's work up in his like neck and head. I want to make his head a little bit bigger here so we've got room to work on him. Let's put some detail here. First things first. Get that in the right place. Down a little bit. Yeah. He has a little bit of a hunch. It might just be in his sprite he's leaning forward, but because that's what we're working with, let's just make the assumption that his head is a little bit protruding forward. And he's got this very square face and a bald head. So that's going to be the front of our head here. No ears. So we just got to find his jaw. And we'll give him an open mouth just so we can show kind of his body here. All right. So no nose. These guys are very simple. Let's look. What are the elements of his head? He's got this heavy brow. Somewhere. Heavy brow, no nose, square mouth, and he's got these like this going on. I don't know what this is, like the side of his. It almost looks like that's his jawbone, and then he just unhinges his jaw like a freaking snake, which is kind of an interesting concept. Let's look at that. Can we do anything with that? With that like unhinged, maybe it's like part of like a scream or something. Maybe they're designed to be able to yell like that, or maybe they don't have a proper jaw because they don't eat. Or do they? I have no actual clue. So his eyes have this kind of like mask shape kind of going on, and he's got this really heavy front brow, no nose, this big heavy kind of jaw. Let's bring it down. Sort of. Actually, can I use that on it? Nah, it's too hard to work into a picture. There might be something to that, but I'm not sure what we would do with it. So for right now, let's just have his mouth open. Now I know he can close his mouth. I chose a sprite where he had it open so I could talk about his teeth. So it's not like that's the only way to do it. But I'm still gonna give him the flat teeth because I still think it's interesting. That is, the idea of them being like a mass-produced monster is really cool to me, and I'd like to really emphasize that throughout this version of the design. Get my tongue in there. I don't know if imps have tongues, but we'll just good. Actually, maybe would he have gums? I'm gonna say no. I'm gonna say that these teeth are just like a plate that are put in there. They're just like a piece of metal that they just like socket into this thing's jaw. You know what? In that regard, actually, maybe we want to find. I'd like to find elements to emphasize his sort of sameness in his face, in addition to just looking like all the other guys, I suppose, because that's an easy thing for a sprite to do and go unnoticed. But you want to find elements that emphasize. So let's think about what can we do to really make this guy look like he is one of a million rather than one in a million. His heavy jaw there. Maybe we could try some bolts or something. We could like make his jaw look machinery, kind of like that. Maybe just leave it bland. I'm not sure. We could do. Let's leave his skull open. Eyes. Make his jaw jut out here, or his upper jaw. Connect that. Good enough. Or you know what? Actually, how about this? How about something simple? Since these guys are like completely demon horde, subservient, go to die machines, let's just put a chip in his head. Just like. Bam. Like this is, we put the skull together, you know, inside it, here's all the gubbins, here's the basic machinery he needs to function, here's his mouth, and then here's where we socket the mind control chip to make sure that he never gets any ideas of his own. So I'm gonna do that. Let's just put like a chip in his skull right there. And then let's go in and let's just put some detail in here and work this idea out. Enough detail. We're just sort of working with the same ideas of like kind of this mottled flesh or mottled with two T's. This sort of like mottled, like ineffectual flesh, kind of these little under the skin wires that are probably running to different parts of his skull, and that's kind of it. So it's a good little starting point here, and that's a good face, and then nothing too special to do with his chest. Now, we want to keep the same ideas going on, but we don't need to do anything. We don't need too many big points of emphasis. We've got this, we've got that. Since we're realizing an existing sprite, we don't want to completely overload it with a bunch of new stuff. So from here on, I just want to add little things that kind of work with the design we have. So we're just going to move along. This is his fighting arm, or I should say his non-fighting arm, because the other one is the one with the gun. So we'll just move through here. You know, something I kind of think about now that I'm working on this guy is my ass backwards fan theory, well supported by the idea that they attacked like a base first, like a research military facility. So in each game, like the enemies kind of escalate, they get crazier and crazier. But in this first game, they're relatively simple, just kind of like demons and stuff with very basics. There's a couple of augmented creatures, but they're not very common. But maybe that's why a demonic incursion starts there, so that Mr. Spider Mastermind bad guy could get his hands on all the wiring and guns and computer chips and parts that they needed to mechanize a demon army and start, you know, if we're working with that idea that I'd like to keep working with, that they need these like machine parts to function, or like it helps like sort of ground their demon energy in reality, that would completely explain why they went there first. They could steal all the parts they needed. Because if you have the power to zombify people, why not start in like a town, you know? Why not go somewhere that's like relatively undefended? Unless there's something in the Phobos research base that people did to unleash them. I don't remember. Google it. But for our fan theory, for our nonsensical theory crafting, I'm going to stay away from that for now. And we're just going to keep working with what I don't know. So it makes sense that they would attack that kind of base so they could get a hold of all the parts they need. Starting with like the basic stuff they needed to craft, you know, or maybe they already had the basic stuff they needed to craft imps. Or maybe that's something people like on the base did, is they found like they got a hold of a demon somehow and did like the basic like augmentation they needed to keep it in reality. You know, just some like black site like evil PMC basic stuff. They got a hold of one of these creatures through, I don't know, some kind of future technology that doesn't make any sense, but and then they're like, well, it's completely unstable. How do we stabilize it? Well, if we put this like chip in its brain and, you know, and a little bit of grounding wires, we can like make it work. And they made like maybe like a proto imp, like a very basic creature that could stay, or maybe it was one of the bigger, the batter demons that they used it on, and that's what kind of kicked things off. Is they put it on, they messed with a creature that was a little too smart for them to keep their hands on, and then it brought that technology back. Maybe it was the spider. Maybe they found a demon that was just a brain, and they were like, well, that's pretty harmless. Even if it is smart, what can it do? And then accidentally taught it how to make bionic monsters. But who knows? But it's fun to think that it was like an imp or something first, that there's like a proto imp out there that's like the basic, like functional, it has like really rudimentary versions of this technology that got refined into like the badass, like efficient factory produced killer imps, the sort of you know, kind of Lord of the Rings style, that they just like, well, we know how they were made the first time, now we'll do it with alchemy and we'll make fake orcs and kind of like that. Let's just maybe put some like ribs in here, sort of show, we'll make those like metal so we can see a little bit more of his pseudo bionic nature. It's a little bit of an add to the sprite, but that's okay. It's not a huge change up. You could work it in and be sort of get away with that. So I'm gonna. All right, let's zoom out a little bit. How are we doing so far? We need another shoulder horn here. We're doing good on that. This hand, whoop, we ain't drawn this hand yet. And this will be simple. We'll just give him kind of a paw. He's got what he's got. There's claws. We know what's there. And then let's change his leg position just a little bit here. Whoop. All right, so he's still got these meaty legs. Let's see. The only real emphasis down there are kind of just his knees. There isn't really too much to do with these. Imps don't have any particular mobility. In Brutal Doom, they jump around, but there's no. The game puts no emphasis on their ability to like get around quickly. A lot of them are stationary, but at the very least, they'll kind of wander around the same way the zombie soldiers do. So I don't feel like I want to give them any special, like, leg parts, any like awesome, little spike knees in case they need to knee somebody, I guess. But I don't feel like I need to give them any kind of special leg augmentations, because it would imply that they could do something that they really can't. So we can keep their legs pretty basic, simple, straightforward. Just the way they were manufactured. Their job is to wander and shoot fire, not to engage in high-speed shenanigans. You know, almost none of the demons are engaged in high-speed shenanigans except the pinkies. So maybe that's something they got going on. But anyway, give him a little bit more hips. His anatomy's not perfect, but that's okay. We're designing, we're not arting. It's a little different. Giving him dies, boy. All right, and that's kind of our design. There isn't a whole lot more we would need to change. If we wanted to go a little further and just take it a little bit further from where we started. Maybe we could sort of emphasize, he's got fireball hand, so maybe we'll go over here and do a little bit of, maybe he's designed to use, you know, the hands for different purposes. So maybe this hand would have like a little bit of extra claw, you know, just so he's multi-purpose. Make it a little bit slightly more prominent, not so much that it would really stand out, but you know, give him this kind of claws, and then sort of this one would be, I don't know, maybe like a small, ooh, hey now, moving stuff around. Maybe do some like small, nope, do some small in bionics, maybe like a little, I don't even know what actually, maybe it's robotic parts. Like I feel like I want to emphasize something to help him sort of claw over here, but since it's all internal, I don't really know what. So let's just put a little bit of piping in his arm, just a little bit of this, a little bit of that, maybe like a, no, screw it. We'll leave it simple. It works because it's straightforward. It's slightly bigger than his other hand, because that's his fighting hand. You know, the last thing, I had this kind of idea sort of in the midst of this that might be neat, is you wouldn't, because of the way we posed him, it wouldn't really work. But I like to think that these guys they're not infinite. Like they can, like they could only have so much fire in them, right? They might have some kind of like storage or like something to keep them going. But I like to think they would need to recharge themselves. But they wouldn't be able to do it manually. You know what I mean? Like a demon this wimpy, naturally, we already put the chip in his brain, so we know he's completely subservient, but that same type of paranoia that makes you put mind control chips in something's brain is the kind of stuff you don't give those guys the ability to resupply themselves. So I want to think that there's like an implant on his back, sort of back here where he's got his robot ribs and stuff. There would be something kind of over here that would be like a gas tank basically, like some kind of little electric whatever that you can plug a pipe into to recharge him. I don't know what kind of device would do that, or maybe they have something that can plug them into a wall. Maybe there's a specialist demon who does that, whose job it is to do that kind of like repair and maintenance stuff. I don't know who it would be. Or maybe they're just charged up the first time and they're let loose, and when they run out, you know what I mean? They're just like shock troopers, so when they run out of gas, you just leave them dead. Maybe after the war is over, they'll collect the survivors just for economics, but they're just sort of charged up the first time and let go. But either way, I like the idea of them having this little implant on their back, which to me would be sort of something similar to the like vents. It would have a similar visual design, but it would have like a plug or something, so it would be like connectable. And then maybe on the side of it, hang on, let me clean this up a little bit. So that's where it would like sit in his flesh, and then on the side of it maybe like a little doo-doo-doo-doo, so you could see sort of how much power he's got left when he's on. You can kind of see when he's running on low. It'd be sort of like, and then medium. Ooh, that ain't good color. Medium, and then like full, so you know how much energy he has. And it'd work kind of like that. I don't know how many fireballs you get out of a charge of demon energy, but you'd have that kind of like up on his back, so he'd have a way to like refill. So last thing to do, let's put some color on this guy. So we want to emphasize some of what we've done. Now the imps are poop brown, nice and classy, but they have a little bit of like this orange hue. They're not quite dead brown. They have a little bit of like a lively reddish hue. So let's start with this dead brown and we'll work our way up. That's just a nice simple paintbrush. We're not going ham on it. We're not going to do a bunch of texturing and stuff. We're just going to kind of do what we need to get the message across. Now let's put in some of this guy's metal. So since I had that idea with like his teeth being metal, I feel like this guy wouldn't have multiple kinds of like metallics. He's a mass-produced unit. There's a million of them. So let's kind of let's stay on our brown palette, and let's go into this kind of like pale into cream. Let's see what we can kind of get there. Sort of like that. We'll go a little bit less, kind of there. It's a little too brown. We can find kind of a happy medium. Yeah, that'll do. So this is like a very, very grayed out cream color. I want it to be nice and grayed out because I want it to be just somewhere in the middle between this and metal. And then we're still on our brown palette. We're going a little bit more towards red. We're staying all in the same kind of color spectrum because we want to keep color symmetry. We'll go over here a little bit darker, kind of emphasize finding the inside of his mouth a little bit. Is red for some reason. That doesn't really fit with the rest of what we've constructed for this because that would imply he's got like more blood and flesh. But we're just gonna go with it. Kind of emphasize that tongue, a little nasty. All right. So then we again with red. He has got these like crazy eyes. He's got these really crazy like glowing eyes, and I don't want to take that away. I put these kind of pupils on him when I was doodling around, and I like them. I want to keep them, but I still want to put like it should be a background element somewhere in like the biomachinery of his eyes has to be something functional that sees. Which these lights aren't. That's not really necessary for that to be that way for Doyle, but it's just it works for me. I like to if you look close enough, you can kind of see sort of the sort of critter in there, and let's give it a little bit of sinister glow, nice cheesy little airbrush effect, plain and simple. And we'll go and I'll mess with that a little bit more before we're done. But let's find he's got the chip in his head. We want to emphasize that. Find that, and let's find all the little metal on his body. It's this same. Probably what his bones are made out of, honestly. If anything, it's the same sort of structure they made his bones out of, and they just could probably like 3D sprayed like the flesh on him, or maybe they like grow them in a vat. A vat feels a little bit more Doom. Let's say that they have like the bone structure, and then they have like the sort of coated goop in a vat or something that they like grow onto him, or maybe it's just straight up in a factory. They just like staple the flesh on, and it kind of heals up. That would have been a nice visual detail we could have worked in too, is like kind of stapled on skin. But these guys, I want to keep his design simple because he is still like a mass-produced. I don't want him to be like this really over-detailed creature. All right, so there it is. There's his flesh. There's his metal. We've got all the basic pieces. Let's put a little bit of shimmer on it just so we can see that this is metallic. I'm going for, if you're interested technically, or for technical stuff, I'm going over my my normal working layers, which includes my line work, so I can add this kind of like sparkle. This is a nice little trick. It's nothing. It looks very nice, but don't be impressed by it because it is super simple, easy to sneak in, makes things look a little more detailed than they are. Depends on how much you like line work, but it's a little cheesy effect we can use to give us some cheap metallic affair. A little bit more up here because this is towards the top and a nice thick. Metal, and then we'll do his teeth, of course. I really thought about like ways to change his teeth and like these monster teeth and all kinds of stuff, but they're so key to this idea of him being a unit instead of an individual that I really wanted to keep it that way. Now let's emphasize a little bit up here. These kind of pieces. I want to do a little bit more with these eyes since they have this vicious shine where above the I'm going to use my lines as like a guide. There we go, that's what we want. And give them that true glow. And then we'll put a little bit on the outside here to show that they sort of glow in the dark and they light up the bits of skin around it. Perfect. All right, so the last thing we want to put some emphasis on is the skin around his implants, because we want it to be kind of gnarled and nasty. This doesn't have to be done in this upper layer, but we're already here, so screw it. Let's just see what we can do. Just a little bit of this high point stuff so we can see where there's sort of improbable or uncomfortable things under his skin. Man, that's a bit much, actually. Let's go. Let's use these sort of colors. Up high. Make sure we make it distinctive from the rest of the skin. Over here where there's a little more light, we want to go a little higher. It's got a little bit of shine because like the skin's sort of stretched out over this sort of gross, or sort of this sort of gross internal wiring that he's got. And yeah, there we go. It's kind of nice. So that's our basic design. These are our changes. So we look at the basic imp, and we kept all the basic elements here. Machines and flesh, machine and man. Mass production was my addition, so we worked that in. And that's our imp. That is our imp. And okay. That's it in a nutshell. Thanks for sticking around, guys. Catch you next time on Design Workshop.